I was briefly in a group called Bow Wow Wow with Malcolm, but I actually would never wear the clothes. I remember getting into a lot of trouble with Vivian because I wouldn't put on her clothes for this gig that I did. My first ever gig with Bow Wow Wow, which was at the Rainbow Theatre. I was actually pushed on stage by Malcolm, but I remember there was a big sort of to-do because I wouldn't put on the pirate clothes because I had my own kind of, what I thought, rather gorgeous look, so I wasn't going to change. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Vivian, obviously, and you know, when Malcolm passed away, I was very sad because, you know, he was a huge part of my life. You know, I mean, I met him when I was 16. He was hugely influential at that time. I think he was a real maverick and very important person. So for me, you know, when he died, it was a huge loss, a huge loss. Very surprised, actually, as well. Obviously, it was a great time to be a teenager. You know, I was sort of 16 when punk exploded. But then, you know, before that, there was kind of Ziggy Stardust, which was equally important to me, probably more important. But I think punk, yeah, was a really exciting time. And I guess the next big thing was acid house, you know. I've almost been part of all those kind of big explosions, you know, I think. The acid house scene is kind of almost written out of history because of the drug aspect of it, but it was a very, very important period in British pop culture history. So, you know, I think that's also very important as well, because that's kind of what got me into DJing. You know, that's how it started, going to clubs, you know, because, as I said before, you know, pop music became really predictable at that point. So acid house, dance music was the way to kind of go if you wanted to be part of something really invigorating and exciting. Well, I wasn't really involved in the jungle scene for obvious reasons. It's a little bit kind of urban and aggressive for the batty boys to go to, but I mean, I appreciate all dance music, do you know what I mean, if it's well done, you know. But you wouldn't really see me at a jungle rave. Hip-hop's really done nothing to my music. I mean, obviously, you know, I appreciate it, but, you know, the sort of the homophobic side of hip-hop does nothing for my life whatsoever. You know, I think it's a great art form, you know, and I think it's obviously phenomenon, you know. I think it's really sad we don't actually have a similar thing in England, because we don't really have a black music scene in the UK, even though, you know, we start a lot of things and we kind of inspire a lot of people. We don't actually really support black artists in England. It's very, very hard for anyone who's making hip-hop music or even soul music in England to get ahead. You know, we don't have that kind of thing that I have in America, which you have to respect. And the black music industry in America is phenomenal. You know, it's a kind of force to be reckoned with. But in the UK, we don't have that. And yet we sort of have such a long history with black music. You know, I mean, I grew up in the 70s, really, and reggae music was huge in the 70s in the UK. Huge. I mean, a lot of the songs that I've covered, like Everything I Own, I first heard in 1972 or 73 when I was a kid, you know. So we have a long history, especially with reggae music anyway. First tunes really were things like Everything I Own by Ken Booth, which turned out to be a bread song. I didn't know that when I was a kid. Susan Cadogan, Hurt So Good, you know, Anthea and Donna, you know, Uptown Top Ranking, and then sort of more hardcore stuff like Legalize It by Peter Tosh, and, you know, through kind of like, you know, friends, of course, you know, music gets passed around, still does. I mean, I still have friends all around the world who say, you should hear this, you know, or do you remember this? But reggae was a big love of mine when I was a kid, you know. I never met the Mad Professor. I mean, I've done bits and pieces with kind of reggae producers over the years, but, Usually the people that I work with who are into reggae are actually other white people who are kind of obsessed with reggae. I work with a guy called Drumhead, who's also my drummer, and you know, he is, for all intents and purposes, a black man who just happens to be white. You know, he's drummed with Linton Kwesi Johnson, you know, with Dennis Bovell, so many amazing people. So you know, that's a very interesting thing about English people, because there are lots of white English kids who actually think they're black. Brilliant. I'd love to work with David Sherwood, but I don't think he'd work with me. He hasn't got the balls. He was actually, I went to see the Slits actually a few months ago, and he was doing the sound, and it was phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. I kept looking to see whether they were really playing, because it sounded so good. You know what, I get turned on by lots of things really, but the last kind of record that I really loved was Temper Trap, Sweet Disposition, because the guy's voice is really beautiful. And there's a band called Phantom Limb that I like, which are kind of like a weird country band, but they've got a black singer. I like incongruous things, I like things that shouldn't work, because I think Culture Club was something that shouldn't have worked, but it kind of did. So yeah, I'm into kind of things that are kind of left of centre, really. I don't think of myself as an icon. I don't get up in the morning and go, "Morning, icon, how are you? What's some coffee?" I mean, I think all those kind of terms, they don't really mean that much, you know. I mean, one thing that I get a lot when I travel is I meet lots of gay people who tell me that I made it easy for them to be themselves, and that makes me really proud. It's one thing that I'm very proud of. That wherever I go in the world, whether it's, you know, out of Mongolia, you know, Argentina, wherever, I get so many people coming up to me and saying, you know, when they saw me, it made them braver. And I think that is a huge, huge thing, and I'm very proud of it. And I want to make more people gay. I think the first gig that we did where there was, you know, thousands of little girls dressed as me was quite a trip. Because, you know, before that, our audience was quite trendy, fashion student-y, kind of art school-y crowd.